Liverpool losing 3 in a row. Why hasn't it clicked?
If you look at their XG, they should be 8th. I think there's quite a bit of work to be done actually for Arne Slot.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of Real Madrid in their Galacticos. You look at the individual names on paper and you think, well, how could this team possibly be beaten? They're going to win it all. Football isn't won on paper. And I do think you're right. I think maybe they've tried to change too much too quickly.
What a disaster of a start this is for Ange Postecoglou.
I think this has the hallmarks of being a disastrous appointment.
I wonder if it leaves Marinakis with a little bit of egg on his face.
Marinakis will live and die by this call, and I think he will realise quite quickly that this is the wrong fit for Nottingham Forest, the wrong fit for the fans, the wrong fit for the squad of players, and I only see this ending one way.
It's Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface. Dashboard Dean Ashton is here, a former England striker, and he's back behind the dashboard, which is great because we've been missing your car diaries. I know that you did spend a bit of time in Norwich, but this is very Alan Partridge.
Yeah, just a bit. I don't actually need to be in the car. I just thought I would. I like it.
Why not? Why not? It's just become your thing. Also here today is Alex Crook, a.k.a. the Saltmeister. He is here. Dino, I'm a little bit worried about the Crookie Monster.
Right.
I'm concerned about him. Yeah, I am. I'm worried. I want to check, see if he's okay. Because yesterday, he was doing a match report on Brentford against Manchester City. And he was trying to get his point across that Manchester City weren't being very creative and they didn't have control of the game and they didn't, come up with an abundance of chances. And he used XG to make his point. Yes, the Crookmeister used XG to make his point. He said, "You won't believe this, but the XG for Manchester City is only 0.81, right?" He didn't really know what it meant, but it sounded good. And he was correct. So, but the fact that he has allowed that statistic, that metric to come into his lexicon, I think is quite a big thing. I think it's a turning point in his career.
Are you sure he wasn't just trying to order some food or?
I also used it to shoot down the XG because I think it was 0.8 in the first half. They'd already scored by that point. Kelleher had made a really good save to deny Tijani Reinders. And Sam's argument was, well, it's the percentage of a chance. And I said, well, whenever Erling Haaland has the ball inside the penalty area, surely the XG should be 0.99. But I guess it doesn't factor into account the player who is taking the shot, just the percentage of the shot actually going in the back of the net.
Well, that's the whole point of the metric. It's an average of everybody's shot. So because he
He's above
overperforms
average.
that shows that he's above average. Yes, exactly. That's how we measure it. Well done. We will get him. We'll get him there, eh, Dino? We'll get him there.
I know you've got your work cut out, but you're doing well, Sam. Keep going.
It is the second checkpoint of the season. We're going into the international break in October. It gives us a chance to look at the title race and the battle at the bottom of the Premier League from a different lens. I mean, not necessarily through a car windscreen, but why not? It just spices things up. Let's get into the title race now. Arsenal go top as Liverpool lose 3 in a row. Yeah, Liverpool losing 3 in a row. And for the first time in his managerial career, Arne Slot losing 3 in a row in all competitions. He's never done that in his managerial career. Why hasn't it clicked, Dino? What's happened here? We'll talk about Chelsea in just a second because I think they deserve a mention for their performance at the weekend. But specifically on Liverpool over the last couple of games, is this something that's been coming?
Oh, absolutely. I think from the start of the season, you could tell that, there was a lot of changes, but I think it had trickled on from last season. I didn't think they ended the season incredibly well in some of the performances that they had. You could see the teams were getting at Liverpool and down the sides of their defence, and it seems to be happening again. And the new fullbacks that have come in have certainly not secured that up in any way, shape or form. And talking of XG, I think, Liverpool, if you look at their XG, they should be 8th. The last minute goals, the character that they've shown in certain games, actually it could have been a lot worse. And I think there's quite a bit of work to be done actually for Arne Slot to get this right and get them, where they really should be, considering the talent that he's got there.
they spent a lot of money during the course of the summer, and a lot was made of their recruitment. Isaac, Wiertz, a lot of headline makers coming into the club. But is there a danger that actually they've made too many changes to their starting 11? And instead of a sort of evolution under Arne Slot, which it felt like at the beginning of last season, it's become a revolution this summer, and that's unsettled everything, Crook.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of Real Madrid and their Galacticos. You look at the individual names on paper and you think, well, how could this team possibly be beaten? They're going to win it all. They're going to win the Premier League. They're going to win the Champions League. They're going to win the Cheltenham Gold Cup. They're going to win the Ryder Cup. But obviously, football isn't won on paper. And I do think you're right. I think maybe they've tried to change too much too quickly. I keep highlighting it. I think they picked it out on Match of the Day at the weekend. I think the loss of Trent Alexander-Arnold is having a massive effect on Mo Salah in particular, because those two had such a great understanding last season. Trent's runs and the fact he was so good coming forward enabled Salah to pick up little pockets of space that maybe aren't there. It looks a bit congested at the top end of the pitch. I think you've got too many players who all want to be in the same sort of position. But then you look at the end of the game against Chelsea. I think we all felt once they equalised, I'm still not sure that Alexander Isak meant that touch, by the way. I think he's actually miscued it and it's ended up looking like a worldie of an assist. But you thought then, well, they've got the momentum. They're going to go on and win the game. Salah's put one into the stands that he would have scored last season, cutting in from the right on his left foot. How many times did that end up in the back of the net last year? But the last 7 or 8 minutes became very frantic. And I think Liverpool overcommitted in terms of putting men forward to try and get the winner, when actually they probably should have just been managing the game now to make sure they didn't get beat. And that's been different as well, because last season I thought they were quite dull at times, Liverpool, because they were so good at killing games. They seem to have lost the ability to control the flow of proceedings.
In fact, one of the things that you said was that they weren't a great team because they were a little bit dull and they didn't blow anybody away. But that was kind of the point. That's what made them so good, so consistent, was that they were in control. I think credit has to go to Chelsea, by the way, because like you, I thought as soon as they conceded the equaliser, there's only one winner here. But Chelsea took the game to them in the last 10 minutes. They were definitely the better side and they deserved that winner. And we'll get to that in just a second. But Florian Wirtz has had a lot of attention, right? Everyone's talking about him and he hasn't settled in. He hasn't done this and he hasn't done that. His touch to set up Mo Salah at the beginning of the second half was just an example of the quality the kid has got. And by the way, if you look at the statistics and look through some of the metrics, Crook, you can see that he has been creating loads of chances. I wonder, Dean, actually, if the others are letting him down. And looking at Mo Salah's reaction to missing that chance after Wirtz had played him in with that lovely little balletic turn, he actually mouthed the words, sorry.
Which he doesn't say that often, to be fair.
He did.
I know, but because it was such a wonderful, would have been a wonderful assist, that, you know, the creativity of that, the vision, the execution was magnificent. And he's done quite a few of those type of touches in and around the area without maybe getting the benefit, like you say, of the other players putting those chances away. Himself hasn't really looked like scoring. That's a slight worry. But again, when you've got someone of that talent, and we've done it too often, especially in the Premier League, when the players are getting used to the pace of the league and a new side, we write people off a little bit too quickly. And I've heard a lot of negativity actually about Wirtz, when if you really watch him, he's still giving a lot to the team, except you would say that actual end product in terms of goals. But I have absolutely no doubt that he is going to be brilliant.
Yep, I absolutely concur with that. I want you to get this image etched into your mind. I can't get it out of mine. Enzo Maresca sprinting down the touchline, jumping on the back of Esteval. Everyone realising just how talented this young Brazilian is. Centre-backs dropping like flies, but doesn't matter. Chelsea got over the line. Caicedo absolutely bossing the joint. Let's start with the performance of Chelsea. I think it's the best one definitely this season, the best since the Club World Cup final. They aren't consistent enough. But as a one-off performance, how impressive was that, Dino?
Oh, just incredible. That's what this team is capable of. This squad is capable of, and Maresca's already shown that. And you know what I saw in the Club World Cup made me think they genuinely have a chance to push for the Premier League title. Now, obviously, like you said, the consistency isn't there. They've had troubles with injuries. There is a lot of young players still in that squad, but if you're capable of that type of performance, then I think there has to be a bit more pressure then on the manager to deliver that on a regular basis. But I've got to say, I love the celebration. I absolutely loved it. Especially, it's more the fact he's in that outfit as well. Do you know what I mean? It's just see him sprinting past all the supporters behind him. It was brilliant.
The cream jacket and the yoga pants. Yeah, I mean, it's not the greatest look in the world, is it? Let's be honest about it. You know, I mean, the training wear does need a little bit of work. You talk about there's too many young players in the team. There's only young players in the team. That is just what Chelsea are. And I think that's one of the issues and why they won't end up challenging for the title. But bearing in mind the pressure that has been on the Italian shoulders, and there has been pressure, and we talked about it in last week's podcast, you know, the alleviation of the pressure only came with the 1-0 win, rather unconvincingly, against Benfica in midweek. But certainly this result has helped. What could that performance do for Maresca, though, Crook?
Well, it will certainly silence some of the noise around him. I think we both felt it was a bit odd that Chelsea felt the need to brief last weekend that he wasn't under any pressure. Obviously, after the start they've made to the season was a little bit underwhelming, and it's the type of performance that I think gets the fans believing as well, because it always seems a bit of an uneasy relationship between those Chelsea supporters and their manager. I think a lot of them are not convinced, despite the fact he delivered silverware last season. And I've got to take my hat off to him for the slight tweak that he made, bringing Malo Gusto into midfield as well. That was a move that worked out really well. Obviously enabled Enzo Fernandez to get higher up the pitch, and Caicedo to a certain extent as well, because it meant that Gusto was always filling that role in front of the back four. And it was so important, that axis between Gusto and Caicedo, bearing in mind...
It was the rotation. The rotation was so important, Crook. They went man for man at times during that midfield. So Gusto would go and sit on McAllister, then they'd switch round, and Enzo Maresca would have that job. And they stopped Liverpool playing in that area by making sure that there was always someone sitting on the key playmaker.
Yeah, and it was crucial because obviously it was a very makeshift back line with Achiampong and Badiashile, the lesser spotted Badiashile at centre-back. Credit to Reece James as well. There's been a lot of talk about England right-backs. Obviously, Trent left out the squad because he's injured, but he wouldn't necessarily be guaranteed to be in anyway. And a few eyebrows have been raised that Tuchel always picks Reece James. I think we saw at the weekend why Thomas Tuchel is so confident in Reece James's ability. And there's little doubt in my mind, actually, that when he's fully fit, probably he should be first name on the team sheet in terms of that England right-back spot.
Yep, and of course, we found out today that Reece James has pulled out of this England camp. He's got an injury, but there were no surprises that he was in that squad. The uneasy relationship with the manager, I think, stems from the fact that, obviously, you know, Chelsea supporters have seen the performances over the course of the 12 months that he's been in charge, and they haven't always been spectacular. There's been some great performances like we saw on Saturday night, but not necessarily consistent enough. But also because, you know, if you're a Chelsea supporter, you don't want to get too attached. This is not a relationship that's going to be a long-term one. Do you know what I mean? It's Chelsea. We just don't do that. Monogamy is not for us. The other sort of point you made there about Reece James is he's got this fantastic ability to whip a ball in, but he has got a dogged determination just to be part of this side at the moment. So many times we've seen him out with injury, but they've worked so hard on trying to get him back in. And this is why now we sort of saw him drip fed in at the beginning of the season, I think, to ensure that he was robust enough to be able to play a greater part this season. Squad depth is a major, major plus point for the team that are top of the table. That's Arsenal. They're there by a point now. And the depth of that squad has been absolutely superb and key to their early season form, Dean Ashton, because when players do get injured, the replacements are top quality.
Yeah, they are. I was there on Saturday for the game against West Ham, and they were just so convincing, Arsenal, in that game. I know West Ham were particularly poor, but they weren't given the chance to even settle or get a grasp in the game because Arsenal was so strong. Odegaard goes off, and they can bring on Zubamendi as a replacement, and you know the performance doesn't drop whatsoever. I think that's what was missing last season. I thought they were pretty much there, and then a few injuries just cost them, I think, a few too many points. This season, they have to win the Premier League. I just can't see how they can miss out this season with that squad.
Adrian Durham said it on Game Day Live, actually, this week. He said they would win it. They'll be top of the table tonight, and I think they'll be there at the end of the season. I think we've all got this feeling that Arsenal are in the best position to do it because they look like they've got the best squad, and they do look a little bit more controlled than everybody else. Everybody else just looks a little bit chaotic at a certain department. So Liverpool's defence is not great. Their attack's not 100% firing. Yes, they're winning games, but they just don't look in control of matches. Manchester City, still a little bit erratic. But Crook also sent a message saying that he believed Arsenal would run away with it on our private WhatsApp group this week. So why now is everyone convinced? Why didn't everyone come out at the beginning of the season and say that? Because we were talking in our pre-season podcast, this is going back into the end of June, beginning of July, about the squad that they were building, and we knew what was happening there. So why now is everybody all of a sudden convinced, Crook?
I actually tipped up Arsenal to win the league last season. I didn't expect Liverpool to be so good under Arne Slot. And I think this year we all got sort of dragged along by the fact that Liverpool was signing all these superstars. And I don't think any of us really could see past the Reds retaining their title, the fact they've been a bit off it, the fact Manchester City are still in transition. I know you were strong on them, Sam, at the start of the season. I wasn't. I think that just adds to the Arsenal bandwagon jumping, if you like. They're odds on now with the bookies, which I think maybe is a little bit of an overreaction to the start of the season, but they just don't concede any goals. And as you've already alluded to, unlike the other two teams there, City and Liverpool, they win games in first gear. It was no sweat against West Ham at the weekend. The same against Olympiacos in the Champions League in midweek. And where they're so resolute defensively, and they've added that bit of stardust now with the likes of Eberechi Eze, although he missed an absolute sitter at the weekend, I think it's really hard to pick holes in this Arsenal team. I think their biggest issue is away from home against the top sides and Mikel Arteta's mindset. We saw that at Liverpool. They have obviously still got to go to the Etihad. They weren't great at United on the first day of the season. But if he changes that, I think they're going to be very hard to reel in.
Well, we will be there when they do go there to the Etihad Stadium. We'll also be at Manchester City, Liverpool, which is not too far away. But Manchester City only 3 points off the top. Liverpool second, 15 points from their 7 games, 1 point off Arsenal. Tottenham Hotspur and Bournemouth are only 2 points off the top as well. Crystal Palace in 6 are 4 points off the top, and they had a chance to go second yesterday and threw it away late on against Everton. One cause for concern for Arsenal is the injury situation. They do seem to be picking up quite a few of these again. Dean Ashton, Martin Ødegaard, unlucky. Looked like he was returning to fitness and form, and then all of a sudden gets a bang on the knee, and now he's out of international duty because of a medial knee ligament injury. I mean, they feel as if this one's not going to be as bad as first feared, but it is still a problem, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I think it was his own issue, to be honest. He dangled the leg out and got whacked by Somerville. You could see straight away there was an issue, tried to carry on and couldn't. But yeah, let's hope for his sake that it's not a long-term issue. And Declan Rice had to go off with what looked like a back issue, but I'm pretty sure he'll be fine as well. But again, it's they'd have to get some serious injuries now for it to really affect that squad because of the depth that it's got. And there's players that aren't really getting a look in yet that you would say actually, in other teams they would be playing regularly. So I don't think it's an issue right now. Obviously, anything long term could then impact fatigue on a lighter squad. But there's no excuses anymore. They're there. They're a superb team. Defensively, they're magnificent. There's no excuse now, really, to not go and win something massive.
Indeed. Gyökeres, big money striker, playing well, not necessarily scoring goals, but certainly helped them score goals. Did that last week. What's his role going to be when Havertz returns, Dino?
Probably the same. I think Havertz will work around Gyökeres. He's played pretty much every minute for Arteta and won't stop. I love his attitude, I love his mentality. What he's going to give you is, even if he's not scoring the goals, which I think some of the other strikers, including Havertz, don't give you, is that ability to just run the defence ragged, pull them out of position, to allow your other players, and it's an unselfish role, and he's one of the best at being unselfish. He will get his goals. He's looked a bit desperate, I think, at times to get those goals when it's come into the penalty area, and he looks all a bit rushed. But his ability to drag players away when it's tight, and it was against West Ham, his ability to drag players away can't go unnoticed. It can't. It's an ability that not that many strikers actually understand.
Brentford were beaten at home by Manchester City, who got the job done on Sunday because of their XG being so tightly examined by Alex Crook. You have to say, though, that Erling Haaland, talking of strikers, looks hungrier than ever this season. His scoring run of 12 goals in 9 games, absolutely superb. And the goal that he scored on Sunday, when he basically just ragdolls Sepp Vandenberg, he's like, get off, and then charges his way through. I said during the show that Crookie and I were doing, it's like he took him out with the trash. Just throw him away. I'm here now. Everybody move. There's a goal incoming. But are they too Haaland focused? Do they have enough goals from other places, Crook?
No, at this moment in time. And I think I made the point to you before kickoff that Haaland obviously was far and away their top goal scorer. Their next leading scorer in the Premier League was Estev with his 2 own goals at the Etihad the previous week. So that isn't great.
And he plays for Burnley, for those who don't know.
I thought, and I've written about this for the talkSPORT website in my comment piece from the game, that Phil Foden was a little bit over keen to try and make a point. He seemed in the first 25 minutes, half an hour, when City were completely dominant, just to want to shoot every time he got the ball. And you referenced it, actually, that there was a chance he had early on when he could have played in Savinho. He went for goal himself. It was a tame effort, and Savinho was furious about that. So as much as Foden has improved on what we saw last season, he isn't back to his best, barring that Manchester derby. And I think Thomas Tuchel's decision to omit him on form is probably the right one. But they do need goals from elsewhere in the team. I mean, apart from rollicking Foden, I can't recall too much else that Savinho did. Doku provided a bit of an outlet when they were under pressure when he came off the bench. And I think actually he's had a reasonably decent start to the season. I like Reinders, and he was unlucky not to score with an effort from outside the penalty area, but they can't just rely on Haaland. The big issue for me with City yesterday, because as I say, they looked like they were going to blow Brentford away for half an hour. Once Rodri went off, they really conceded control of the game. And that's a big problem because, as Alan Pardew told you over breakfast, when you're coming back from that serious of an injury, and Dino will know this, you do start to pick up other issues in your body. And I'm not sure that we're going to see the best of Rodri for several months.
Yeah, that's true. Me and Alan Pardew were having breakfast on a rooftop, and Crookie was there, but he went off to do a hit on breakfast. And whilst he was off having his little bit of employment, Alan was talking to me about Erling Haaland and about Manchester City and what he thought about them. And then he said the problem here is that Rodri cements it all together. And the fact is that he won't play that many games this season because he will continue to pick up injuries, because after such a long layoff, that is what happens to the body. And do you know what? He was absolutely spot on. The thing that does give me confidence about this Manchester City team, and I'm, as you know, someone who backed them at the beginning of the season to win the title, is the acquisition of Gianluigi Donnarumma, who makes a massive, massive difference. He's just so big, so strong, so assertive, comes and claims everything, comes and punches everything. And Erling Haaland, it's like having an Erling Haaland-style goalkeeper and Erling Haaland being the goal scorer at the top of the formation. So I think that gives them a chance. And they're still 3 points off the title, off the top spot, which is, at the moment, I'll take that as we go into the second international break. That's it for the title race. Let's talk managers. Ange Postecoglou, the Forest manager, winless from his opening 7 games in charge. He's not the only manager that is under pressure, but what a disaster of a start this is for Ange Postecoglou. He's been at the helm at Forest for just 7 games. His post-match comments have gone down about as well as his results, Dino. Why did he say, "I don't have to be here, I could be on my couch watching the game"?
Because he constantly just wants to bat away the criticism that he has, in that, he can handle. and tries to prove that he can just handle any of the criticism and it's not going to affect him. And look at my record. And honestly, there is part of me that really likes that attitude, and the way he goes about it. But you have to back it up then with the results, with the performances. And he did that at Tottenham in terms of winning the Europa League. You know, he threw that back in everybody's face. But this has got to turn very quickly. This is an owner that in Marinakis that I don't think will hang around because he knows him and he gets on well with him. You know, he has to pick up results. The only thing I would say is that let's not be naive to not think that last season's performance by Nottingham Forest and Nuno was way above expectation, and they hardly had any injuries. I just remember every week thinking it's the same team that plays and gets picked, and they're on this roll, and all of a sudden, even before Nuno has left, things had changed. Players have moved on. Injuries. Murillo has had injuries already this season. It's it's not as easy as it should seem with that Nottingham Forest team, albeit it's a terrible start.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And you say his record speaks for itself. You have to back it up with statistics. Well, he lost 26 games in all competitions last year. Yeah, they won the Europa League, but it became a habit losing matches. The issue here, I think, as well, is that the owner has to take a level of responsibility to change from one style to another in the middle of a season or 6 weeks into a season seems to be a little bit negligent because it's going to be very difficult for everybody to get up to speed, especially with the size of the squad, the number of players and the number of games that are taking place. There's never a training session where they can do any real proper work with everybody because someone is recovering or there is another game just around the corner. I wonder if it leaves Marinakis with a little bit of egg on his face because he's an incredibly ambitious owner. However, I think sometimes you can try and force the pace of change just a little bit too quickly. You know, when he came up from the Championship, he was talking about winning the league. You know, that was his next ambition. And sometimes I think that's good because it drives everybody to a higher standard. They obviously chopped and changed managers very quickly after being promoted. They probably would have changed it earlier if someone hadn't have sort of talked Marinakis back from the brink a couple of times with Steve Cooper, who did keep them up, was the last manager actually to keep a team up in the Premier League. But by trying to force the style of play, by trying to insist that they're going to go on from where they were last season, has he actually set Nottingham Forest back a little bit here, Crook?
Well, first and foremost, Dino is very kind when it comes to Ange Postecoglou and his record. This is someone who's lost 30 of his last 49 Premier League games. And I would argue Thomas Frank is proving that the players on the books at Spurs were better than what Ange Postecoglou was getting out of them week in, week out. And this is a Forest side who flirted with the Champions League for a lot last season, reached an FA Cup semi-final, spent big in the summer. So they certainly weren't prepared for a relegation fight. There was always going to be a drop-off, I acknowledge that. But just on what you're saying there about the owner, he did say in the statement hiring Postecoglou, we want to kick on to the next level now. We want to win trophies. Postecoglou is a serial trophy winner. I worry about winning a game first before you start thinking about putting silverware in the cabinet. I think this has the hallmarks of being a disastrous appointment. And there's a lot of focus on the hierarchy at football clubs this morning because obviously Russell Martin has lost his job at Rangers. I think we all saw that coming. But when a managerial appointment goes so wrong, I think it's only right you look at the people who've made that call. And this was a call made by Marinakis. You can't blame Edu, although I think his arrival certainly ruffled the feathers of Nuno Espirito Santo. So you're right, Marinakis will live and die by this call. And I think he will realise quite quickly that this is the wrong fit for Nottingham Forest, the wrong fit for the fans, the wrong fit for the squad of players. And I only see this ending one way. It might not be during this international break. It could well be during this international break, but I don't think this is going to work at all.
Steve Coppell holds the record for the shortest managerial tenure in the Premier League, 33 days, when he went to Manchester City and very quickly changed his mind. Ange is on 27. He'll be on 40 by the time we get to the game live on talkSPORT after the international break against Chelsea. I mean, look, it would be ludicrous, wouldn't it, to change it again now, Dean Ashton?
It would, yes, it would. but I guess we're seeing it more and more now, where I think sometimes owners are, whether they're willing to admit it or not, are just not willing to continue with a bad run of form when it gets to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games. Managers
But
are,
arguably, this is the opportunity for him to get his feet under the table, to work on the training ground with those that are left behind, to get his plans and his message over to the players, because they have had training session game for the last 3 weeks that he's been in charge of. This is the chance where now he could impress his ideas on them, isn't it?
yes, but that's using common sense and what we would all consider to be reasonable. But that isn't the case when you've got that dotted line just below you, and you're fighting, and you've got the supporters, which do play a big role now. I think more than ever, the noise that you get around supporters on social media, etc., and from us, the media as well, hyping things up. It does tend to push owners, I think, probably quicker than they normally would do.
Does he also need to realise, Crookie, that PR is a thing? If you're in the biggest league in the world and you are front of house as far as a football club is concerned, do you need to know how to present yourself, and should he be presenting himself a little bit better? Listen, he actually has got a great personality, Ange Postecoglou, behind it all, and he can be quite charming and charismatic, but he doesn't show that often enough, does he?
No, particularly post-match. I think his pre-match press conferences are always more humble and more entertaining, arguably, than post-match. He's obviously someone who takes defeat very badly. I guess Simon Jordan would say, well, show me someone who likes losing and I'll show you a loser. But I do think he could be a little bit more humble with the press. He could show a little bit more humility. I think he's also got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder because he's Australian and he's coming into the Premier League and maybe feeling that because he's Australian, we are judging him for that. I don't think that is the case. I think actually his achievement should be celebrated. The fact he has come over to this country and managed to put a trophy in the cabinet at Tottenham. So yeah, I do completely take your point. And I wonder what he's like around the training ground. Well, I know what he's like around the training ground. He can be quite an isolated character. Doesn't necessarily engage too much with his players, and again can be quite downbeat when results are going badly. So I think all that can conspire against him.
I think also PR is a thing for people like Ruben Amorim. He's great with the press. He always gives you a line. So I think he gets a little bit of an easier ride in some senses. I think the circumstance is completely different. Everybody knows Manchester United has been a basket case for years. So he sort of, I don't know, because he's got that ability to communicate and communicate very well, tell you a story, tell you what he really thinks. You get an authentic answer from Ruben Amorim. You sort of find that he gets an easier ride in some of the sort of press coverage. And I think Keith Andrews is a prime example of this as well. We've got a lot of stick off Crookie, loads of stick off Crookie in the build up to the season. I think he said, why would you appoint a guy that MK Dons rejected? Was one of the quotes from
what
the
I said was
Crookmeister.
it was an unnecessary.
Oh, no, he's going
risk
to change
like
it now.
Brentford.
Go on, he's going to change it. What did you
It
say?
wasn't personal. I said it was an unnecessary risk for a club like Brentford. I stand by that. They could have got a more experienced manager, but he's doing okay, Keith Andrews.
He's doing okay, yeah, because actually, after the game on Sunday, he called him Crookie in the interview, and that made Crookie very happy. And now he's like, oh, Keith, he carries himself really well, isn't he? Fantastic, doing a great job. He just lost 1-0 to Manchester City. But obviously, if you know how to handle yourself with the media, you can make friends. Crook's a prime example. He's now like putty in Keith Andrews' hands. He's like one of his little mannequins in the set piece routines. He'll do whatever he's asked, just because someone said to him, Crookie, in a post-match interview. Quick word on Nick Voltemada. Brilliant again, and proving those bitter Bayern hierarchy ex-Chiefs completely wrong. Okay, they spent a lot of money on him, but he's been probably, out of all the big money strikers that have been bought so far, the most consistent, Dean.
Yes, and will only get better. I think I did the game midweek in the Champions League, and after a bit of a shaky start, as the game wore on, he was just a superstar in the game. Just everything came into him. he fed it to his teammates. He got himself in the box. He was a threat. He was everything you'd want from that type of striker, in my mind, anyway. And it's becoming rarer to see somebody play that role and take the ball in back to goal and have the ability, the awareness, the dribbling ability that he's got in tight areas. It's rare to see it. I've really enjoyed watching how he's settled in already.
Yeah, he's been brilliant. Let's get stuck into the bottom of the table now. Looks like one of the most open races in years to stay in the league. Well, the efforts of the promoted sides are really making it difficult for some of the established names in the Premier League. And we've talked about Nottingham Forest, but they're not too far away from the relegation zone. Wolves already in there, winless from their opening 7 games. West Ham struggling as well. But autumn is going to be a crucial season. I mean, Wolves have got Sunderland, Burnley and Fulham in 3 of the next 4. 3 of Burnley's next 4 games are Leeds, Wolves and West Ham. West Ham have Burnley, Leeds and Brentford. And Leeds have got Burnley, West Ham and Forest. I mean, talk about moving season. We're going to see a lot of things develop here. This is crucial, isn't it, Dean Ashton?
Yes, and whether you expected to be down there or not, as a team, you can't help but look at those fixtures. You are just drawn to them. It's talked about a lot. You can say, "Oh, well, you're going into every game trying to win it." Well, yes, you do, and you want to try and get points where others don't expect you to. But you look at the teams around you, and it does get ramped up. You can feel it during the week with the preparation, the pressure. They're going to be crucial, and I know it still feels relatively early, but they are going to have such a big impact on what happens at the end of the season. These games against each other. So, I mean, maybe it's a good thing that they're all happening at the same time. Maybe it'll all jumble up and we'll be right back where they kind of started. But there's certainly teams like Wolves and West Ham. There's serious pressure there for it not to be just a proper relegation battle all season.
Yeah, well, Wolverhampton Wanderers, I think, have got the toughest run during that period because they've got Sunderland, Burnley and Fulham. They threw away a lead against Brighton. They always look as if they're going to score a goal, but they always look as if they're going to concede one as well. What hope do you give them of staying up, Crook?
Not much, as we sit here at this moment in time, to be honest, because I think they're poor in both boxes. You look at the stats from the weekend. They only had 9 touches in the whole game in the Brighton penalty area. Successful passes, a lot fewer than their opponents as well. So even though they had the lead for a long time in the game, I think in the end they were probably fortunate to come away with a point, and the goal itself was fortunate. It was a great strike. Obviously, it's hit the frame of the goal and then rebounded off Bart Verbruggen and gone down as an own goal. But they don't look like they're going to keep a clean sheet. They don't, to me, look like a team who are going to score bags of chances. I think they're going to be reliant on the individual quality of Jorgen Strand Larsen. And it is interesting, isn't it? Because it seemed strange at the time. I think, they were 5 games into that point and hadn't put a point on the board. They gave Vitor Pereira a big new contract because they wanted to be seen to come out and publicly back their manager. Well, they did similar with Gary O'Neill. He got a 4-year deal and was fired 4 months into the season. So if Pereira doesn't turn this around quickly, I don't think it's an absolute given that he's going to see out the season, let alone that contract. I think they are in massive trouble, Wolves. And actually, this goes back quite a long way. I remember speaking to a former legend of theirs in the summer. He watched a couple of their pre-season games, and he said, mate, this team is a disaster. They are so bad. And I think we're seeing that now in the Premier League.
This has been going on for ages. This is not a new thing. I was told at least 2 years ago that this team will go down. They at some point they will go down because their recruitment does not replace the people that they keep selling. So if you keep farming out better players and bringing in players that aren't as good as the ones that you've lost, the quality of the squad goes down every single window. And that is what has happened here. The players that they've got there are not as good as the ones that were there when Nuno Espirito Santo was in charge. Slowly but surely, the squad's been dismantled and not been replaced with a similar quality, Dean. It will happen at some point. It's just a matter of when rather than if, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, I totally agree with that. And Cunha's the latest one that they'd lost, that was a match winner and keeping them in the league, and he just he hasn't been replaced with the like for like quality, or even close to like for like, and that's a big issue. Crookie, I just want to ask you, when they give a manager a deal like that at this sort of time, would there be a clause in there though for the club?
In terms of if they were relegated, potentially, although that certainly wasn't articulated to us at the time. But yeah, it wouldn't be beyond the realms of possibility. But I don't think they could terminate it any earlier than that without having to pay a hefty amount of compensation.
But the other thing about this now is, and you've seen this actually with other managers, and Nuno is one of those, by the way, Nuno Espirito Santo, is that a bit like, I think this probably needs to be explained, is that when you get sacked, right, they don't pay up your contract. What they do is they say, you're now on gardening leave and we're going to pay you in a lot of circumstances. Sometimes they do. I mean, some managers have been paid up, whatever, negotiated an exit. And then that, if you're a big manager, you've got a clause in your contract which says, if I get terminated, I get this much and that's it, right? But if you're like Nuno Espirito Santo, they put you on gardening leave and they'll pay your salary, because as soon as you get a new job, they can stop paying your salary. So they don't have to pay that big compensation. Now, actually, with Nuno, he got a job really quickly. And there was a bit of legal wrangling that was going on during that time. And Nuno, I think, felt as if it was a good idea to go and get a new job quickly rather than be in that situation with Nottingham Forest. So I think it depends on what situation you're in and what manager you are. But these big compensation packages only happen, I think, in certain circumstances. Crook, is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was one of the motivating factors in Graham Potter not going back to work for a long time, because effectively he was still being paid for by Chelsea. And you've got to think that even if he does lose his job at Wolves, Vitor Pereira, he's got enough credit in the bank in terms of his career history that he would probably quite quickly walk into another job. But I just think optically, if they do go down that road again, it's a really bad look again on the hierarchy, because it happened with Gary O'Neill. They changed the sporting director this summer. Matt Hobbs, now at Crystal Palace, left the club. I think that was partly because George Mendes was coming back in and getting more control, but it's not worked so far, is it? And of all the established teams in the Premier League, I think they look far and away the most vulnerable in terms of dropping into the Championship. And who knows what happens after that, because Fosun, as you've mentioned, have been pulling the money out for some time now. They've been selling their best players. There's a toxic relationship potentially between owner and fans. So this could get worse before it gets any better for Wolves.
What about West Ham United? Have they given themselves a chance by bringing in Nuno?
I think so. I'll let Dean come in as a former West Ham player. I think they've looked more organised. They were on a hiding to nothing going away from home against Arsenal. I know they won there last season, but they were always going to lose that. I think they were always going to struggle to score goals. But the players look a little bit more motivated under this manager. I think that's fair to say. It was a good point away from home against Everton. I'm still not sure where the goals are coming from if Jarrod Bowen doesn't score, because Fulkrug has got a lot of qualities and he puts himself around, but I'm not sure he's going to be able to replicate the number of goals he scored at Borussia Dortmund in the Premier League.
Dean, Crysencio Somerville's key, isn't he?
Yeah, he's looked fantastic actually since coming back in this season. Obviously, his injuries last season. The way he can travel with the ball, get West Ham up the pitch, is going to be really important. I think it's slightly laughable again that the reason they got rid of David Moyes was style of football, and now they're back with Nuno, who's going to bring a very similar style to David Moyes.
Are you saying that David Sullivan, Karen Brady, and the hierarchy at West Ham might have contradicted themselves with their actions here?
Just a bit, yeah, I think so. But ultimately, it's the most important thing is staying in the Premier League, and I think Nuno will be able to do that with that squad of players. What he has done is he's gone for a more attacking lineup, even though defensively out of possession they're sitting a bit deeper. When they do have the ball, they weren't able to do it against Arsenal, but I think they will against the better teams. When you've got Fernandes, Paqueta, Somerville, Bowen as your five in midfield, and Magassa obviously sitting as the holding midfield player, I think that's going to have enough quality you would expect to hurt teams. And Fulkrug, he was actually brilliant in terms of what he did. He won every header. he was a real nuisance, but he's got no support, and he hasn't got the pace to threaten teams. Callum Wilson didn't come on, which was really odd. He brought on Callum Marshall, the young lad who I think touched the ball twice, and Callum Wilson was fit. I saw him do the running afterwards with the rest of the players and looked pretty annoyed, and I just didn't understand what's gone on there.
Yeah, and I think you were talking about this actually during the game. You know, bringing on Callum Marshall is great. You want to be able to bring through the younger players. There needs to be a pathway into the first team, but at the same time, you've also got to give yourselves the best chance of winning matches. And you weren't totally sure that that substitution did that.
No, I thought it was the game's gone, and I'll just protect Callum Wilson because hopefully he's going to be an important player. You only had to see his goal against Nottingham Forest and the way he dodged and weaved and got himself into that position and planted the header into the back of the net to show that he's going to be the player that could push you up the table. He's the one with that, genuine Premier League quality. I know you've got to protect him because of his fitness issues, but he's also got to play and be fit.
Promoted sides, Sunderland started well, got favourable fixtures so far. I suspect they'll start sort of running into a few more troubles. They certainly, if you're going to stay up, you've got to beat teams like Manchester United, haven't you? And they didn't. I'm only joking, Crookie. Just said that for a laugh. I'm joking. Actually, again, with Manchester United, I will say, I have said to you at home, they're absolutely fine. And these wild swings of emotions that you go through on a week-to-week basis, unnecessary because they've won 3 home games in a row. What's the problem? Just chill out. Leave the guy alone.
They go to Liverpool. Let's see what happens there.
That's an away from home game. They'll lose the game. Don't worry. Or they'll draw the game. Doesn't matter. But at home, they'll get enough points to be mid-table at the end of the season, which I think is where they are going to be before they turn over again. But we're talking about relegation, so we don't have to worry about Manchester United. It's okay. They're going to be all right. Just chill. But Sunderland, what do we think? The recruitment's been good, but it's not going to last forever, this. They are going to go through a bumpy patch at some point, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, the goalkeeper was excellent again. I think he's been a real find. The big issue they've got, is when we get to January and the African Cup of Nations, they've got an awful lot of African players, so the squad is going to be trimmed, and I think they need to get their points on the board early. And actually, it reminds me a bit. We lost Milan Mandaric this week, former Portsmouth owner. I know, Sam, both you and I spent a lot of time with him. We've not mentioned him on the podcast, but what a character he was. But that Portsmouth team that got promoted under Milan and Harry Redknapp, they were top of the table, I think, heading into the end of August. I remember they thrashed Bolton at home on a Monday night. They didn't get
Teddy
many
Sheringham
points.
got a hat-trick.
Yeah, but they didn't get many points in the second half of the season. And basically, the reason they stayed up that year was because of their start. And I think it might be a similar situation for Sunderland.
Leeds United, always competitive, lack a little bit of a cutting edge up top, Dean. I was at Ellen Road on Saturday. They had chances.
Yeah, it's going to be an issue, and you always fear when you watch a side that's been promoted play well, but not take their chances or lose games that they should draw or draw games that they should win. It worries me that you play well and don't get the points, especially early on. And where are they going to come from? Joel Perreault, as good as he is in the Championship, I think that's his level. I think physically he's probably not athletic enough to really compete in the Premier League is how I look at him anyway, even though he's a great finisher. So where are the goals going to come from? You're hanging your hat on Calvert-Lewin, which again leads the line in his own way, in a positive way, but he's not going to get you the goals. And I think I've been impressed with Daniel Farke at the start of this season in terms of how they've looked, how competitive they've been, how defensively they've looked better under him in the Premier League, certainly than when he was at Norwich. But you just worry it's going to be one of those nearly seasons.
Talk to me about Dominic Calvert-Lewin, because Stuart Pearce was very critical of his performance on Saturday, but he actually does the work that leads to the Leeds United goal in the match. He's pivotal in that. But he did have 2 or 3 other chances. One in particular, once the ball was won by Okafor high up inside the Tottenham half on the left-hand side of the penalty area, breaks to Dominic Calvert-Lewin. He's inside the box. And when you're in that situation, I think in the Premier League, you need to hit it as early as possible. I might be wrong here, but you tell me. But he seemed to take 1, 2, 3 touches before he made the decisive action. Why would he be doing that?
I would say a lack of confidence. Usually, if you want to be absolutely sure that the ball's in the perfect position for you to strike, is usually a confidence issue. And it's not like he's going through a spell where he's been scoring goals for a long time now. Not since under Ancelotti with Duncan Ferguson as his number. That was when he had that purple patch, and we all thought, "Wow, here's a player that's really going to develop." But he's one of this new kind of breed of strikers over the last 5 to 10 years where he's not in the team to score goals. Yeah, we all think he is, but they're not required to score goals. They are the workhorse that does all the hard stuff, the unselfish work for wingers to score. And he's one of those. And he does it well, but he's not going to get you the goals that you probably require.
And Dashboard Dean Ashton doesn't sound too happy about that current trend. This is our job. This is our glory moment. Don't start giving it to those wispy little wingers. He's so upset about it. He's recording the whole podcast in a car and flashing his lights and turning his indicator on and off, just to almost be sort of like a physical protest. Okay, that's it for the bottom battle. Let's round things off by looking at some of the other major headlines from the weekend. Palace's unbeaten run is over. 19 games the run went on for in the end, but it was ended by Everton, despite being a goal up. Now, this sounds like a little bit of a cliche, Crook, but ultimately, did this run end because juggling the demands of the Conference League, Thursday, Sunday, and Premier League football was always going to eventually catch up with them?
Yeah, I think so, because you've got to remember they're still operating with a fairly small squad, certainly in terms of quality, because they have been a selling club over the last couple of years. So I think inevitably, if they were going to lose a game, probably after a midweek trip away from home in Europe, it was most likely. I think they used a lot of energy beating Liverpool last weekend as well. But Everton away from home is a difficult place to go, and David Moyes has got them really well organised. You're going to be in a battle. So I don't think this is a disaster by any means for Crystal Palace. And I know that the producer here has put a line in the script saying that Glasner complains his side is too tired, but he doesn't make subs early enough in games. Does he need to manage his squad better? I think it'd be really churlish to start having a pop at Oliver Glasner, who won the FA Cup last season. He's led Palace on a club record unbeaten run. So I'm going to reserve judgment. I certainly don't think this is going to be a falling off for Palace. At one stage, it went through my head, Sam, when I was listening to you when I was at Brentford, when they were leading. Just for a fleeting moment, I thought to myself, are we seeing another Leicester City situation here? Are Palace going to absolutely defy all the odds and win the title? They've lost now, so obviously that idea has gone completely out of my head.
Oh, yeah, of course, because you don't change your mind very often. And just to change your mind here, the Glasner sort of discussion about whether or not, he's managing his squad properly. Is it actually the flip side of that, Dean? He made a substitution on the 70th minute when he replaced Jean-Philippe Mateta with Eddie Nketiah. At the time, it was 1-0. And Mateta had a chance headed off the line, had other chances to score. Nketiah comes on and the game turns the other way. So rather than the idea of him not making a sub early enough, has he made that substitution too early? Should he have kept Mateta on?
Oh, I think it's difficult to think that changing your strike is going to have such a massive impact. I think it is fatigue. You can guess the starting lineup in every single game at the moment for Crystal. And why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he keep that team? Because they've been so consistent and so successful in those 19 games. Why wouldn't he? But eventually will catch up with you. It was a lot to take on this week with the Liverpool game, the travel in Europe, and then Everton away. And all it was that they were a clearance away from having a point anyway. It's only that Munoz just decided to smack it against Grealish's feet instead of just out for a corner.
Outrageous. It was a great finish from Jack Grealish. What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's what I would have claimed when I was a player.
It was his first goal for Everton. He said afterwards he had no hard feelings about missing out on the England squad, and he understands the decision. He actually used another of Crook's new phrases because Crook's kids now are teenagers, so they teach him things. And he constantly walks around going, "Hey, it's not that deep. It's not that deep," which is what Jack Grealish said after the game to the reporter that asked him about missing out on the England squad. But he has started particularly well, hasn't he, Crook?
Yeah, he has. And as I made the point to you on air on Sunday, I think Jack Grealish is at his best when he is playing with no worries on his shoulders, when he's playing off the cuff, when he's playing with a smile on his face. And I think the fact he's not getting bogged down with worrying about whether or not he's going to be in the England squad come the World Cup next summer is only helping his football, because he didn't look like that type of character at City last year. He looked like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. I did see one tweet actually suggesting that it doesn't say much for Pep Guardiola, that David Moyes has got more out of Jack Grealish in the first 10 weeks of this season than Guardiola managed for much of his Manchester City career. But I'm not going to have a pop at Guardiola, who's just become the fastest manager to win 250 Premier League games. Sometimes players just fit clubs, and credit to David Moyes, who isn't usually that type of manager who entertains a maverick. He has just let Grealish play that free role, and certainly Everton the big beneficiaries.
What is it like as a player when you just settle in so seamlessly? What is the feeling like?
I mean, it is great because no matter how big a player you are, and Grealish is right up there, high profile, you want to be accepted by your teammates. You want to prove to the supporters that you're the player they expect. I think those sort of pressures are right there from the start. So the quicker you can settle in and feel that love, the better you are going to be as a player. I thought it was interesting that his comments before the game about David Moyes saying, just get the ball and do what you want, cause havoc almost. He said, and that's what I like to hear. Is a slight dig at Guardiola, I think. And there's no doubt, Pep Guardiola sees football his own way, and you are going to fit into it, whether you like it or not, or whether that's something you bring. Well, whatever you bring before you turn up at Manchester City, you will fit into what he sees. And Jack Grealish was used, no doubt in my mind, for a certain aspect of keeping the ball, drawing players in, and then releasing it. And he was absolutely brilliant in the treble-winning season. And when they won the Champions League, Grealish was brilliant at doing that. But it took away what made him great. It did. And we're seeing it now again. What he was like at Aston Villa was just this superstar that scored worldy goals and did things that got us off our seats. And Guardiola took that away for his own personal gain, and so he should. But now we're going to see the real Jack Grealish again, and I can't wait to enjoy.
Final word today goes to another player who I think we all appreciate watching, Antoine Semenyo, Bournemouth. What a player. And two sensational goals for him, one of the most entertaining players in the division. I think credit has to go to Richard Hughes, who was the Bournemouth sporting director who brought him from Bristol City. I don't think many people thought at the time he was going to go on to be as good as he has been. And I think he is probably the biggest asset that Bournemouth have got right now, Crook.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's brilliant for the EFL because it shows the pathway is still there. If you do well in the Championship, you get your chance in the Premier League. And he certainly grabbed it with both hands. I described him last season as my sort of guilty pleasure. Antoine Semenyo is still going a bit under the radar at that moment in time. He certainly isn't now. They lost a lot of players in the summer, Bournemouth, but the best piece of business they did was tying him down to a new contract, because I know for a fact he met both Manchester United and Tottenham, but they managed to persuade him that actually the Vitality was the place for him. If he keeps up this start to the season that he's had, I think they're going to have to field some more inquiries from the biggest clubs in the country, because, as you say, he's taken his game onto a new level this season. He just looks so confident, so powerful, such a handful for defenders, and he just scores unbelievable goals. I mean, the Fulham defending was terrible for the first goal, but it's a goal he's got no right to score, and there's not many players at the moment who could have squeezed the ball in as he did from such a tight angle.
Why was it a guilty pleasure? A guilty pleasure is usually something that you shouldn't like, but you really do, like a Taylor Swift album or something.
I don't know. It was just a phrase that I came up with at the time, and so not many people were talking about him at that time. So yeah, maybe guilty pleasure is the wrong word, but definitely one of my favourite players to watch, and he has been for a long time.
I listened to the Taylor Swift album, by the way, that's released over the weekend. It's very, very good. Dean, what next for you? Drive through for lunch?
Of course, yeah. I've got the bed in the back, so at any point if I need a nap this afternoon, it'll be fine. But yeah, it's just life on the road,
Yeah. Car wash as well, yeah. Make sure you put your aerial down before you go through it, yeah. Whatever you do.
Thanks. Yeah.
Right. England doubleheader coming up over the international break, live on talkSPORT. We'll be back on Wednesday to discuss that one. They have Wales. Tough game, actually, against Craig Bellamy's side. And the rest of the news from the Premier League, we'll do that on Wednesday. So make sure you come back and visit us. Thank you very much for watching Premier League All Access from talkSPORT.